So the brothers of Yosef said, "Aval Hashemim anachnu." We are at fault. What we did, that we sold Yosef. And Chazal say, "Mitoch genuson siper hakosov shivchon." Out of their criticism, the Torah says their praise. Shelohaya biyodam ovon elazeh bilvod. This was their only avera. Chazal say mitoch genusan ata shomea shivchon. Person comes along and says, "I've done an avera." And it's the only avera they've done. The fact that somebody has done one avera, mitoch genusan ata shomea shivchon. If that's what you have to criticize him for, that tells you, that's an indication of what the shvach is. So for example, if a kid comes home with a grade, it's an example, happens to be true, by my brother came home, got a grade, got a 92 on a test. My parents were concerned. Got a 91, they went into the other room, they had a conference. What's going on with his grades? He gets a 92 and a 91 on a grade, and the parents are concerned. Then you hear who's the meduba here? I got a 79. We family went out to a restaurant. We celebrated. Got a 91. Oh, it was one of my warmest childhood memories. So when in Eretz Yisrael, those of you remember years ago, there was a spate of bus stop burnings. Bus stops were being burnt in Eretz Yisrael. Those of you who were here, some of you weren't here, some of you were here. Remember, bus stops were being burnt. They assumed immediately, because they were bus stops that involved unsneous advertising, the assumption was that it was Charedim who were doing it, and they were already blasting the Charedim. Turned out in the end it wasn't. It was people who decided to frame the Charedim. That was the irony. But they assumed it was from people. This made international news. Was on the front page in the newspapers in England. Bus stops are being burnt in Eretz Yisrael. Because of bus stops, could you imagine anybody in Brooklyn? Can you imagine somewhere in New York where they arrest the guy for burning bus stops? In New York, he'd probably be given the key to the city. That's what we're guilty of. If that's what we're guilty of, that tells you something about the Maila of Klal Yisrael. In Tach and Tat, when the Jewish people were suffering the slaughters, 1648, 1649, so the Taisis Yontif, when Bagman, Khmelnytsky, Yamach Shemo, Zichro, and his hordes of Cossacks, when they rode across Europe, they were destroying, pillaging, and the expression, when they use the expression unspeakable horrors, they were the ones who originated the word. What they did to Jews in the Jewish community, what the Cossacks did, was something not to be believed. It was anything that's been done since then. What we see today, certain groups, certain terror groups, it really reminds those who know, it reminds of the Cossacks, what they're doing. Just things that were absolutely unmentionable. And the Taisis Yontif did what's called a She'elas Chalom. Jews were being slaughtered. Statistically, they say there were 250,000 Jews who were killed, which at the time was 1/5 of the population of the Jewish world. And the Taisis Yontif did what's called a She'elas Chalom. A She'elas Chalom means that those who know how to do it, they can contact through a dream, make contact in Shemayim, and try to petition and ask a question. Taisis Yontif, when I say those who know how to do it, just remember the Taisis Yontif is printed in almost every version of Mishnayos. So once you're printed in the Mishnayos, come and speak to me to find out if you're qualified to do it. Until that point, you're not. The Taisis Yontif is printed in every set of Mishnayos that we have. He did what's called a She'elas Chalom. Why are the Jewish people suffering like this? Why are the Jewish people? Now, think to yourself. If you were going to answer, let's say you didn't know this and you didn't know he did that and you didn't know the answer to the question, and you were asked, what aveiras did the Jewish people do that they had a gzeira on the Khmelnytsky and the massacre of 250, a quarter of a million Jews? Let's start off with the Zara, Gilui Arayish, Shvichus Damim, Lashon Hara, some Bittul Torah, something that the standard fare that we're used to. The Taisus Yontif was told in a Sheilas Chalom the reason Jews are being slaughtered is because of the lack of decorum in the shuls. There's too much talking in the shuls. And the Taisus Yontif instituted a tefillah that we have to this day, certain communities say it, a mishaberach that's made in the shul for misha shomer pivu l'shono b'shas ha-tefillah. Stop and think to yourself, okay, we shouldn't talk in shul. I mean, how terrible is that? The fact remains we're in shul. People who aren't in shul certainly aren't guilty of talking in shul. How many of us are in shul? And the answer is, if that's what you're criticizing us for, you're criticizing us because we're talking in shul, then you should know, maybe we're not, maybe we're a little better than people think that we are. So nowadays, especially during the 3 weeks, Shiva Tammuz, 3 weeks, Tisha B'Av, so we hear a lot about this concept, an idea called Sinas Chinam. Sinas Chinam, baseless hatred. By the way, I don't know of any expression in Chazal, this is parenthetical, I don't know of anywhere in Chazal where it says Avas Chinam. I know of a Chazal that says Avas Yisrael. I don't know of Ahavat Chinam. I don't know exactly what the makor for that is, other than wishful thinking that it would have been contained in Chazal. I don't know of anywhere Chazal say Avas Chinam. He has an expression, Avas Yisrael. We find it. Bein Adam L'Chavero Chesed. So there's something called Sinas Chinam. Sinas Chinam is baseless hatred, which again, just to know, just for the record, you should know that the Sinas Chinam that destroyed the Beis Hamikdash was not just two frum Jews. It wasn't just the guy in shul yelling at the gabbai because he didn't give him an aliyah and therefore not invite him to his son's wedding. That's it. It could be it was going on. Most of the Sinas Chinam was the sinah of the Amaratzim to the Talmidei Chachomim. That was the real Sinas Chinam. The Sinas Chinam was the venomous hatred that the Amaratzim had to the Talmidei Chachomim, so much so that Rabbi Akiva himself said that when I was in Am Haaretz, I said, "Mi'itzneni Talmid Chacham v'shachenu kechamor." I wanted to break his bones like a donkey. It wouldn't have been good enough to be a dog. I wanted to bite him so hard I'd crunch his bones. That was the Sinas Chinam that was going on. So we hear that's the catchphrase now, this period. A lot of Sinas Chinam. I think that certainly in a yeshiva such as ours, and I think that for many Jews, anyone who's in this Beis Medrash right now, anybody who's in this Beis Medrash right now, I think we are all guilty of a Sinas Chinam. And you know who we're guilty of Sinas Chinam towards? I think we're slightly guilty of Sinas Chinam towards ourselves. People on Tisha B'Av who are sitting in a Beis Medrash looking for Hisorus Tshuva, looking to be mischazik on a Tisha B'Av, you can't be that bad. You just can't be that bad. And a person who's sitting the year round in a Beis Medrash, a person who's a Ben Aliyah, a person who's learning, a person who's working on himself and trying to grow. Yes, we have our flaws. Yes, we're not perfect. Yes, there's room for improvement. On the other hand, we have to understand a little bit. Maybe we're holding ourselves at a critical level. We are guilty of sinas chinam towards ourselves. I'll explain to you what I mean. There's a Gemara in Tainus. Gemara says that certain people were greeted bina shemayim. I don't know exactly what it means to be greeted bina shemayim, but the Gemara says there was a man named Abba Umna. In Abba Umna every day, kol male yoma de shabsa, Abba Umna was greeted bina shemayim. Every day. Abba Umna was greeted bina shemayim every day. I don't know what that means exactly, to be greeted bina shemayim. That's what it says. Ula Abaye kol male yoma de shabsa. Abaye was greeted bina shemayim every Erev Shabbos. Somebody Min HaShamayim said good Shabbos to Abaye. Don't know what that means, but he was greeted. Apparently it's significant. L'Rava kol male yom de Kippurei. Rava was greeted every year of Yom Kippur. Says the Gemara. Abaye havekachol shedaite de Abaye mishud de Abba Umna. Abaye he had chalishus adas. He was depressed. He was sad. Why him? By the way, by Chazal, if Abaye was upset that Abba Umna was greeted every day and he wasn't, it's not because he was jealous of Abba Umna. He was jealous because he realized there's a madrega over here. Abba Umna must be doing something that I'm not doing, that he gets a greeting. Oh, kachol shadaite de Abaye mit Abba Umna. Amruleh, they said to Abaye, you can't do what he does. He was involved in certain things the Gemara says, and Abaye wasn't holding by being able to do that. Then the Gemara says, Rava had chalishu sadas because of Abaye. Rava and Abaye, there are not, I think, I heard once, there are not 4 pages anywhere in Shas where you won't find Rava and Abaye's name mentioned. Either Rava or Abaye. You won't go 4 pages in Shas that you don't find Rava and Abaye's name mentioned, except if you're using an art scroll. Then it's 12 pages. So other than that, you won't go 4 pages anywhere in Shas without seeing Rav and Abaye's name, and you should know, by the way, they talk about Shiva got up once and made a siyum on Shas. And he got up at the drush and he said, I made a siyum on Shas, and it was 8,400 and something dapim of Gemara. And so somebody was sitting there and said, it's not 8,000 dapim, it's about 2,000, something. He said, 8,000, what do you do? It turned out he was using a shatnesti, he was using an art scroll. So every daf he learned 4 times. I want to tell you something, I'm jealous of that Baal Tshuva, I'm jealous of him. He learned every daf 4 times, and he probably did chazara on each daf 4 times as he learned it. So 12 times, 16 times he learned the daf. That I'm jealous of. Say, Rava and Abaye, Rava, we paskin like Rava. Abaye 6 times, we paskin like Abaye. We paskin like Rava all the other times. And Abaye only got the greeting on Erev Yom Kippur. Abaye got it every Erev Shabbat. Rava cholosh daite. What does Abaye got that he hasn't got? So the Gemara says, Mistayech, be satisfied. They said to Rava, be satisfied that your zechus protects the entire city. Your zechus, you have a zechus that protects the entire town. And because of your zechus, the town will be happy with that. What does that mean? What does that mean, Abaye? I'm not talking about zechusim right now. I'm not talking about the town right now. I'm talking about being greeted mina shemayim. I'm upset Abaye is greeted mina shemayim. Don't worry about it. You have a zechus. Okay, we'll talk about zechusim later. Right now I'm talking about being greeted mina shemayim. So the Farshim explained, the pshat is like this. When a person has a schus, how do you get mina shemayim? How does a person get to be greeted mina shemayim? Obviously, you have a schus. A schus, and again, I'm putting it in terms just for us to be able to relate to the terms. When a person has a schus, it unleashes, for lack of a better term, it unleashes a certain energy mina shemayim. That energy could be manifest in a greeting mina shemayim. But if we need to chip away some of that because of the schus for the entire town, we need to take some of that and give it to the entire town. So there's less left, if you follow, for the greeting mina shemayim. Rav is being told you don't have less schus than Abaye. You don't have, if anything, you have more schus than Abaye. But we need to use a chunk of your schus to protect this entire town. And Mimela, there's less schus left to be greeted mina shemayim. That was the response to Rava in the Gemara. I think that a Torah Jew, we're so harsh on ourselves, especially when we get to this point of the year. Tisha B'Av, Shiva Assassin, then we get to Yomim Noroim, and then we're even sadder than we are on Tisha B'Av. And a person has to know, 1 second, who am I really over here? Are you sure? You, every single one of you sitting here, are you sure you don't have a schus that's protecting over the entire town? Are you sure you haven't done something this week, day, month, or year that isn't protecting the entire kehillah? Are you so sure? How do you know? Sometimes, I get guys in the yeshiva, a guy comes over to me, he's broken. Guy's mom is shabrach, and he comes to me, I was davening, guy's been about tshuva for about a week and a half. I was davening with the tzibur, and I couldn't keep up in the siddur. I lost the place. He's convinced that the gates of Gehenna are open up and they're waiting for him over there. You really think you're going to get punished? You're going to get punished because you couldn't keep up with the tzibur. You really think that that's what the taveh on you is going to be? You're going to get schar for every moment the tzar that you had not keeping up with the tzibur. Every time you had to flip a page, you're going to get schar for a mitzvah. You're not going to get aveira for that. That's what you're worried about. That's what you're so concerned about. So, Guy comes to a Rav. He has a Shiloh. This year, everybody knows the Har Nof tragedy. There's a Shiloh was asked. When one of those terrorists was in the shul, guy picked up a shtender, and somehow he managed to hit the terrorist. He was stunned, the terrorist. He and others were able to get out after he hit the terrorist with the shtender. But the shtender broke. Came to Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein, Rav Eliashiv's son-in-law. He asked the Shiloh, do I have to pay for that broken shtender? That's what you're thinking about? That's what you're thinking about? You're saving your life? What the psak halacha is immaterial right now. Psak was he doesn't have to pay. But what the psak is immaterial. That a person asks a Shiloh like that? And a guy gets into a bus in Eretz Yisrael. He gets on a bus from Bnei Brak to Yerushalayim. And he had a suitcase with him. So he asked the driver to open up the back. He said, put the suitcase in. So the driver opened up the back, the baggage compartment. So the guy walks over and he's trying to push. There's no room. So he has to adjust. He couldn't get leverage. So he climbed in to move the suitcases. For Shteitzach, the guy couldn't see. He locked him in there. He locked him in the baggage compartment. He drove him from Bnei Brak to Yerushalayim. Okay, he got bumped around a little bit. He got out of the bus. The first Shiloh he asked, I would have called the lawyer. First person he called a Rav. What was his Shiloh? Do I have to pay for the ride from Bnei Brak to Yerushalayim? That's different. What the psak is immaterial. A Jew asks, what kind of schus do you think he has? What kind of schus do you think he has? A person who asks such a Shiloh under those circumstances, you understand? A person thinks, I'm just an ordinary Jew. You're not an ordinary Jew. You're not an ordinary Jew. There is no such thing as an ordinary Jew. Because a Jew who's a bar aliyah is not ordinary. Every Jew who's a bar aliyah, who's growing as a Jew, is not ordinary. And you don't know, you're clueless about the same thing, you're clueless about what your averas are, you're clueless about what your mitzvahs are. You don't know what kind of schusim you have that protect yourself, protect your community, protect Klal Yisrael. Another man, back in the 20s, time of the Depression, where Jews were fired. If you didn't work on Shabbos, you didn't have a job. You didn't come, the old saying was, if you don't come to work on Saturday, don't bother coming to work on Monday. And a Jew comes, says to his wife, I'm sorry, can't take it anymore. I'm going to have to work. It's pikuach nefesh. I have to go to work on Shabbos. His wife said to him, you're not working on Shabbos. He said, I have to work on Shabbos, pikuach nefesh. No, that's the end of the argument. What does a wife do? Chachmas noshim bonsa beisa, the wisdom of the wife to maintain the Jewish home. She took all of his clothing and hid his clothing at night. Friday night he went to sleep, his wife hid the clothing. Hid his clothing. In the morning he gets up, and women can hide, women hide something, it's hiding good, Gets up, he says, where are my clothes? I got to go to work. He says, why do you have to go to work? This is pikuach nefesh. I need my clothes. She says, if it's pikuach nefesh, you're willing to go in your pajamas. You're not willing to go in your pajamas. It's not pikuach nefesh. And he didn't go to work. What's her schus? Who are her grandchildren? Who are her descendants? I don't know. But there's no question that she's got a schus. A mother-in-law. True Maisa. Mother-in-law comes to her son-in-law, and she decided, I guess she was having a bad day. He was having a bad day. She said to him, you're a good for nothing. You're a bilti mutzlach. You're never going to amount to anything. Her mother-in-law really unloaded on him. 2 weeks later, she comes over to him. She calls him over. She says, Herschel, I want to tell you something. You're a malach. It's quite a change. You're a malach. She says very cautiously. Why do you think I'm a malach? She says, because in the last 2 weeks, I saw your mother and I saw my daughter, your wife. And neither one of them said a word to me about the fact that I told you you're a good for nothing. And the only way that could possibly be is if you didn't say a word to them. If you didn't say a word to them, you're a malach. Because if you would have said something to your mother, I'm sure I would have heard from her. And my daughter, for sure I would have heard. And if I didn't hear from them, it means you're a malach. Get a little idea, a little inkling, what Jews are worth. Get a little inkling of, what is it? How bad are we and how good are we? There's a soldier in the Israeli war. One of the wars in Lebanon, I think, his tank got hit by a missile. The tank went flying. He and all 4 soldiers in the tank escaped. None of them were killed. The tank got hit. Tank went flying. And none of them were injured. None of them were hurt. They were killed. One of them came out. He had a bad limp. They told him that there's a certain doctor, hospital in America that's capable of taking care of it for him. So this soldier came to ask a Shiloh, should I go to the United States to have my limb fixed? The Rav said to him, what's your hesitation? He said, because on the one hand, it's inconvenient, doesn't hurt me that much, I could live with it. If people see me limping, they're going to ask me what happened. I'll be able to tell them what happened and tell them what the nace that took place. It'll be a Kiddush Hashem. If I go and I have it fixed, nobody's going to ask me. What about Kvod Shemayim? That was the Shiloh that he asked. The answer again, go to America, have it fixed for whatever reason. That's the Shiloh that a Jew asks. And Rosh Hashiva of Schiller told me just last week, certain man, he knows, who has sons who are Talmidei Chachamim. The man himself is not. His sons who are Talmidei Chachamim. Wondering, what did he do? What was he did? What did he do that he was Zochet the sons Talmidei Chachamim? So the Rosh Hashiva was in his house. Leil Shabbos, he was there for the meal. The man has a big executive chair that he keeps at the front of his desk, at the front of the table. They were sitting there. So Rav Schiller took his place at the side of the table, getting ready for Kiddush. The man said to him, no, I want you to sit over here, at the head of the table. Said to him, what, the Baal Boss. He says, I have a minhag in my house. When there's a Rav or a Rosh Hashiva in my house, he sits at the head of my table. No more questions, no more mysteries. Because I'll say somebody who loves Talmidei Chachamim will have sons who are Talmidei Chachamim. Man loves Torah. Man's mechabed Torah. You know what a schus he has? You know what he's doing for his community? You know what he's doing for us? There was a friend of mine who was raising money for a yeshiva. Did he get a musar shmuz from a balabas? Oh, left him stinging. It was worth more than his whole trip. He went to a balabas somewhere in England. And he comes into this balabas, a very wealthy man. And he says to him, he's trying to make a pitch for his yeshiva. He says, you should have hakaras atov to our yeshiva. He says, why? He says, because the alumni of our yeshiva, the graduate of our yeshiva, was a Rabbi in Cheder in your town. And your son learns by him. He's such a wonderful Rabbi. He's a graduate of our yeshiva. You should have hakaras atov to us. Balabas looked at me and said, and to the Mir Yeshiva, I don't have hakaras atov. And to Koilel Chazon Ish, I don't have hakaras atov. And to the Lakewood Yeshiva, I don't have hakaras atov. And to Or Sameach, I don't have hakaras atov. I have hakaras atov to every single Ben Torah who learns Torah in the world. Because what that Ben Torah is doing is he's protecting me and he's giving to me. That's the Maila and that's the schus of a Torah Jew. He told me, this man told me that he walked out of there. He had a check. But much heavier with the check was the punch in the stomach that he felt he got from this guy. Who did he teach him a Musar Shmuz? Oh, did he give him a Musar lesson? So the Gemara says, in Pesachim, one of the Amoraim, Rav Huna, the son of Rabbi Yoshua, Rav Huna Breder Rabbi Yoshua, was ill. And he was what they call nowadays, apparently he reached a point of he was clinically dead. And then he came back. So his father said to him, what did you see? So one of the most famous quotes from Chazal, from She'enon and Shas, Olam hafuch re'isi, I saw an upside down world. Elyonim lemala v'tachtonim lemata. Elyonim lemata v'tachtonim lemala. Those who are prominent, I saw them down below. And those who are less prominent, those who are down on the ladder, I saw them up high. The standard understanding of this Gemara is, in our world, let's face the facts. People who are out there and they're making money and they're the hackers and they're the guys running the show. Ilyonim, you know, they're the big man they're the big man. Ilyonim lemata. Tachtonim, the B'nai Torah, who are downtrodden and looked down upon. Lemala, they'll be up. That's the standard, that's the pshat. The B'nai Torah will be on top in the Olam HaEmes. But the Mefarshim explain that even within the Torah community, there's an Elyonim and a Tachtonim. Sometimes you look around and say, wow, look at him. He went through Shas so many times, and he's a Rosh Shiva, and he's a big... And we don't realize Kadosh Baruch Hu does not grade based on the way it appears to us with our simple human eyes. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives the grade based on the fulfillment of potential. He learned Shas 20 times, fulfilling 90% of his potential, and you learned Shas half a time, fulfilling 95% of your potential, you're up higher in the Olam HaEmes. In the Olam HaEmes, it works by potential fulfillment. It doesn't work based on objective accomplishment. Elyonim lemata, tachtonim lemala. So it could very well be a person considers himself a simple Jew, and in the Olam HaEmes, he's in for a surprise. Because he gets to the Olam HaEmes, and all of a sudden, you know, they put him in the elevator, and he's going all the way up. All the way up. He says, whoa, I'm supposed to be getting out on this floor. No, you're going up higher. Higher, higher, higher. We don't know. It could be not, but it could be yes. So, if we're going to use Tisha B'Av as a day of improvement, what is Tisha B'Av for, really? Read sad stories about the Holocaust and start crying. Gornish, nothing. You got nothing out of Tisha B'Av. You read a Holocaust story. Somebody made money off you because you bought the book. That's what happened. Got nothing out of a Tisha B'Av. You read a heart-wrenching story and you cried. Tisha B'Av's become around the world. Holocaust Memorial Day. Well, remember it. Don't worry, remember it. Remember it. We know about it. What's Tisha B'Av? What are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do on Tisha B'Av? You know what you're supposed to do on Tisha B'Av? We're meant to be doing tshuva. That's what we're supposed to do. What does tshuva mean? Tshuva means we decided we want to improve. Tshuva means we want to take a step forward. Yes, we say kinos. Yes, we have to lament the destruction of Churban Beis Hamikdash. 100%. But what's the point of it all? Where are we going with this? And the answer is, the point of it all is to improve. In our world, you know, there were two approaches to Musar in the yeshiva world. There was the approach of Slobodka, and there was the approach of Nevardik. The Slobodka approach was Madregas HaAdam. Think about how big we are as people. The Nevardik approach was to take themselves and bash themselves and rip themselves down totally. Nowadays, we can't do that. Nowadays, the therapists are busy enough without a whole line of frum people coming in. Yes, what are you here? We're Nevardikers. Right? It ain't going to work. All that's going to happen is going to be clinical depression. Nevardikers used to walk in, mevaza themselves. They would put nowadays, do it. Don't anybody do that. Madrega Sa'adam. And not only that, we know what works best. You want to get a child to do something. You want to get a wife wants to get her husband to do something. The child. You want to get anybody to do anything in life. Everybody knows that encouragement works a lot better than head-on bashing and head-on criticism. So a person has to know, take a Tisha B'Av. You know what? Let's think a little bit about improvement. But our improvement has to come from some positive energy that we're able to generate. If we just sit around, ooh, terrible, they killed Jews 60 years ago, and we're horrible people, nobody's going to improve. All you're going to do is you're going to go out tonight and eat, and tomorrow's going to be a day like any other day. If a person decides, you know what, I really think I want to improve. So how do we improve? There was a yeshiva for boys off the derech. Boys who were struggling with their Yiddishkeit. The Nevardik approach didn't work for them, apparently. They were struggling with their Yiddishkeit. They were off the derech. And a boy came to the yeshiva. He met a young Rav in the yeshiva. One of the Rebbeim is a young Rebbe. The boy walks in, says, where are you holding? Says, I don't do anything. I don't daven. I eat shreif. I don't do this. I don't keep Shabbos, anything. And the boy says, a few weeks ago I decided to try stop smoking on Shabbos. I stopped for a few hours. After about 4 or 5 hours, I said, this is too hard. And I smoked on Shabbos too. So the Rabbi said to him, the young Rav said to him, I want to make you a deal. I want to make you a deal. I need a handshake, a tchias kaf. I want to make you a deal. You know as well as I do, you smoked on Shabbos, you're machal Shabbos, you're accountable. There could be a punishment, that's the way it works. You're accountable, there are consequences. I will take all of the punishment that you're meant to get on one condition, that you will also give me the reward that you're going to get for those 4 hours that you didn't smoke on Shabbos. Because during those 4 hours when you weren't smoking, the Malachei Ashares were gathered together looking down and dancing and saying, look at that Yitzi not smoking. And therefore, I will gladly take the punishment if you give me the schar. Guess what happened? Just guess what happened. The boy is now Shomer Shabbos. What a little bit of positive energy can do. We need to do that for ourselves, otherwise we're guilty of Sinas Chinam. We're guilty of not treating ourselves properly. I don't say to walk around, blind ourselves to our flaws, and just walk around, I am now a Lamed Vavik who wants a bracha. That's not what I mean. What I mean is that we have to take a look at where we're truly holding, where we're trying to get to, and how to figure out a way to take steps further in order to approach. When Gedolei Yisrael, we always hear about Gedolei Yisrael. Okay. There was a Rav named Rav Toledano. This Rav Toledano, the Stipler Zatzal, once went, he saw Rav Toledano was here in Eretz Yisrael. I think we're originally from Algiers, if I'm not mistaken. The Stipler was here in Eretz Yisrael, so the Stipler went to Rav Toledano. And he came to Rav Toledano, and he said to Rav Toledano, anybody knows anything about the Stipler? If you don't know about the Stipler, ask your Rabbi about the Stipler. Stipler was one of the Gdolei Ador. The stories about the Stipler and his Ruach HaKodesh are, I would say it's the stuff of legend, but it was just so tangible, it was ridiculous. And the Stipler goes to Rav Toledano. If it's not enough, Rav Chaim Kanievsky is his son. Okay, that tells you about the Stipler. So the Stipler goes to this Rav Toledano. He says, I want you to give me a bracha. He says, I want you to give me a bracha. So, okay, in Misarvin Lagodl, he says to start saying to the Stipler, Shem Yimalik. He said, no, put your hands on my head and give me a bracha. This Stipler, Rav Toledano, was a man with Yiras Shamayim, and a man with Yiras Shamayim with the koach of a bracha. Okay, the Stipler leaves. A little while later, I don't know if it's the same day, the next day, Rav Chaim Kanievsky Shlita comes to the house, knocks on the door, they open the door, he comes in and he sits down. And he stares at Rav Toledano for 20 minutes. Just sits there looking. Rav Chaim is never a man of many words. And here he was looking, he's just looking at Rav Toledano. And after 20 minutes, he gets up and he starts to leave. So somebody said to him, what was that all about? So he says, listen, there's a skula for Yiras Shamayim is to look at somebody who's got Yiras Shamayim. And my tata Zok, my father said he's got Yiras Shamayim, so I came to look at him. That was just giving an inkling of what other people thought of Rav Toledano. This Rav Toledano was in Algiers, and after the youth Aliyah began, much of the Algiers community cleared out, they came to Eretz Yisrael. There were still a handful, there was a pocket of Jews left in Algiers, and Rav Toledano decided that we need a cheder, we need a school for those who remain. He gathered together an entire room full of Gerim. He gathered together an entire room full of wealthy potential donors, and he said to them, Rabbosai, we need to build a cheder in town. And they all said, no, we don't know, people are leaving, it's not necessary, and so on and so forth. And they kept, at a certain point, he just broke down, he melted, he dissolved in tears. So, the rich men, they were all like, we're sorry, we didn't know it was so important to you. Okay, we'll give you, relax, or what do you have? He said, that's not why I'm crying. I'm crying because Chazal say somebody has Yiras Shamayim, Dvorav Nishmayim. Somebody who's got Yiras Shamayim, people listen to him, people obey him. And I see you're not listening to me because I have a lack of Yiras Shamayim. This is the man who the Stipler got a bracha from. I lack Yiras Shamayim. Started crying. Haven't you ever felt that way? Haven't you ever gone into a room and say, you know what, I really could be doing better in my Yiddishkeit? My Yiras Shamayim really needs... So what makes you think you're different than him? How do you know that other people sense, know, and see on you that you have a higher level of Yiras Shamayim than you think? You messed up. You had a misstep somewhere. Okay. There's no tzaddik who doesn't do an Aveira in his lifetime. You sure that you're the shegitz you think you are? You really think so? Or maybe your Yerushalayim level is a little higher than you think, and you have a flaw somewhere that needs to be fixed. As opposed to the fact that, okay, the highway to Gehenna is paved just for me. You absolutely sure? You absolutely certain? I'm not so sure. Rav Pilz, Rosh Yeshiva of Tifrach, one of the top yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael. He made a rule for his boys in the yeshiva, no hitchhiking. Nobody's allowed to hitchhike. Dangerous, sakana, who knows, physical danger, ruchni danger. He made a rule. Rav Pilz himself was in a car driving to Yerushalayim. It's at night, and at the side of the road, there's a bacher who's hitching. So the driver pulled over to let the bacher in. As the bacher got into the car, Rav Pilz immediately closed his eyes and turned to the side like that. They shouldn't see the bacher. That the bacher shouldn't be embarrassed. He made the rule. Okay, the rule was broken. The bacher needs to be embarrassed now, sit in the car for an hour and a half with Rosh Yeshiva, embarrassed, cringing. Rosh Yeshiva kept his eyes closed, looking at the wall. Rabbi said, that's Gedolei Yisrael, right? Oh, what a madrega. Did it ever happen to you that you were in a conversation with somebody and somebody joined the conversation, maybe 2-3 people, and you were about to say something and you realize I better not say it because if I talk about this subject, Plony's going to be embarrassed. And you didn't say it. So then what exactly is the difference between you and Rav Pilz? Did it ever happen to you? They went up to somebody's door and you were going to knock on the door and you heard a thunderstorm from behind the door. You realize if you knock on the door at that moment, somebody's going to be embarrassed. And somebody rips open the door. Yeah. Yeah. You interrupted right in the middle of their amusements. And you turned around and you walked away. So how far are you from Rav Pilz? I don't say you're Rav Pilz yet. Learn Shas and Poskim, then maybe we'll talk. But sensitivity? Who says you're lagging that far behind? At a subjective level. Tachtonim lemalo. Rav Elyashiv Zatzal. Rav Elyashiv, I'll tell you what I saw in a second. Rav Elyashiv, this I didn't see, this I heard. Rav Elyashiv Zatzal was a Rav, he was a Dayan with the Rabbanut. And back in the day, the Dayanim were given phones. Phones at one point were at a premium in Israel. When I made Aliyah 30 years ago, you didn't get phones so easily. We lived here without a phone. You could tell where frum people live because you'd see a dira and 7 wires running across the street where everybody's hooked up to one phone line. Everybody took their turn. May you pick up the phone and you hear a conversation on the phone. Sometimes it was actually very good. And you hear a conversation, interesting things. Rav Elyashiv was a dayan with the Rabbanut. And they gave Rav Elyashiv a phone. And every month he would go to the bank and he would pay his phone bill. And when he paid, he would deposit his paycheck. When he went to deposit the paycheck, he always said he wants a certain amount of money to go to Misrad Datot. One month it was 80 lira, 100 lira, 120 lira, 90 lira. Every month he would take from his paycheck, deposit his paycheck and say, I want you to give 90 lira, put it into the account of Misrad Datot. So the bank vice president, who somehow knew about this, he was very curious. Rav Elyashiv, everybody knew. He came to him and said, why do you give every month, you give 90 lira to 100 lira? Why do you give that money to Misrad Datot? He said, look, the chief rabbinate is under the auspices of the Misrad Datot. They give me a phone, they pay the bill. That phone is given to me to use because as a dayan, there are a lot of calls I have to make. Cases come up, you got to research it, talk to people, and so on and so forth. But I also have a lot of visitors in my house. And periodically, people ask, Rosh Yeshivas, others, they ask if they could use the phone. On the one hand, I don't want to say no. A Jew needs a phone. Well, you say no? On the other hand, it's not my phone to give them away. So anytime somebody makes a call that is not directly related to my dayan duties, either I or my Rebbitzin sit there and we time the call and we write it down and we pay the bill. So a person looks at that, half of a fella. First of all, why I gotta be inconvenienced because somebody else wants to make a phone call? Isn't it easier just to say no? The answer is it is easier to say no. And it's very easy for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to say no when we ask him for things. A rule. A Jew does not say no. That's a rule in life. You don't say no. Somebody needs something, it's yes. unless it's extenuating circumstances, then it becomes a no. Otherwise, an approach to life is yes. That's first of all. So a man was eating a supper, parenthetically. A man was in the middle of a supper, got a knock at the door. Somebody came collecting for some important cause. The man got up from his dinner, invited the Meshulach in, sat there for about 20 minutes, schmoozing with him, right around a generous check, and the guy left. His wife looks at him, she says, Chaim, you're in the middle of supper. Why'd you interrupt in the middle of supper? He said to her, listen, I know a halacha that says you cannot be mafsik in the middle of Kriya Shema. There's another halacha that says you can't be mafsik in the middle of Shemon Esrei. I don't know of any halacha that says you can't be mafsik in the middle of supper. And sometimes you find people, we have a policy. You ever hear that? I love that. And if you call it hashkafa, then it's even better. We have a policy. We don't interrupt in the middle of supper. Got news for you. Right in front of an Aron Kodesh, I'll tell you. Your policy's wrong. The fact that you call it a policy, so I know how to spell it too. You're wrong. Rabbi Yashiv, the easiest thing is to say no. Well, you got to now sit down and pay the bill, and you and your Rebbetzin are not going to take time and time to phone. Yeah, a Jew needs something, so you do it. Yeah, that's right. But even more than that, the level of his honesty, wow, Gedolah Yisrael. Yeah, it's pretty impressive. I was in a store a few weeks ago in Geula. There's a bakery. And I walked into the bakery, and I see that there's a Hasidic guy, young Hasidic guy, and the owner of the store. They're standing there by the cash register, and there's a camera right above the cash register. They're looking at the camera, they're looking at the register. They're having an argument about the money. And it's all on film. What was the argument? The store owner said to the guy, you gave me a 50. The guy said, no, I gave you a 20. In the store, you gave me a 50 and the change is yours. He says, no, I gave you a 20 and I'm not entitled to any change. I was standing there. There was one guy ahead of me, which is the only reason I wasn't the one who said, I'll take the money and settle the difference. Because the guy ahead of me said it. That's an argument among the Jews. Rabbi Yashiv in his telephone, and a Hasidic guy saying, it's not my money, so I'm not going to take it. And I want to tell you something else. I don't believe there's anybody in this Beis Medrash who wouldn't have done the same. I don't believe there's anybody in this Beis Medrash who knowingly would take money that they were overpaid at a cash register. So, before we go and set ourselves on that road to eternal purgatory, stop and think a little bit, take our pulse, really who we are. Rav Yisrael Zalman Meltzer Zatzal was giving a shir quality. And in the middle of his shir, a bacher raised his hand and asked a question. Kasha in the middle of shir. Hundreds of people in the Beis Medrash, Rav Yisrael Zalman was giving a shir. Goes, ooh. Rav Yisrael Zalman, the Gadol Hador, he had a mind that moved faster than lightning. Bacher asked him a kasha. Ooh. Taka, a good kasha. That's a good kasha. Don't know? Forget what I said. I'm going to have to try a new mahalach in the sugya. Changes the entire shir, finishes the shir, everybody leaves. After the shir, one of the Talmidei Chachamim came over to me and said, come on. I heard the kasha. It was what we call in the yeshiva world, it was a klutz kasha, and you know it as well as I do. What's that all about? So Rav Yisrael Zalman said, you're right. I'll tell you what happened. The bacher never had talks in shir. All of a sudden he's asking me a kasha. And I happened to notice outside the window there was a man walking back and forth. I realized what's going on. Who is that man? That man is a potential shver. This guy heard about this bacher, might want to take him as a son-in-law. So he's told, yeah, he's mamish, the best boy in Lakewood. And, he wants to see if son-in-law, son-in-law wants to put on a good show too. So he asked the kasha in shir. So what can I do? I got to help. What I got to tell the bacher that's not. So I let the shver think he's got a beautiful son-in-law, got a son-in-law, mamish alamda. That's a sensitivity of a Rav Yisrael Zalman. Somebody said to him, yeah, but now he's going to think he's alamda. So Rav Yisrael Zalman said, yeah, but that's all he wants anyway. He doesn't care if he's or he just wants it. People will say he's alamda. Some people say he's alamda. What do you you think the shver knows how to learn? He doesn't know how to learn either. He heard the kasha too and he was impressed. So he doesn't know how to learn either. I want to ask you a question, Sir Mr. Solomon. Did anybody ever call you up about a shidduch? Anybody ever call you up about a reference? Did you ever make a shidduch for somebody? Did you ever suggest a shidduch? So you're also moving Jews along. So what makes you think you're that much different than Rabbi Zalman? Again, Shas and Poskim. Besides that, when it comes to shidduchim, you're doing what they did. You're doing what they did. The person has to take stock of themselves. We're out of time. Just tell you very quickly. Finally, the Stipler Zatzal B'Sof Yomov. Stipler had all sorts of people came in to ask him questions. Gedolei Yisrael are inundated by people who are nudging them, what they call the nudniks, come in. One guy came to Rav Shteiman recently. Man came to Rav Aaron Leib Shteiman. He said to him, I'm Eliyahu Hanovi. Rav Shteiman said, really? He said, I've been waiting almost 90 years to meet you. He said, why? He said, about 90 years ago, when I was a child, we learned the sugya in Bava Metzia, Kav be'arba amos, kabayim b'shmona amos. The Gemara blibes teku. The Gemara says, doesn't have an answer. We have to wait for Eliyahu Hanovi. Now you're here. What is the halacha? That's what Rav Shteiman said. The man said, I'll be back in a little while. And out he went. So the Gedolei Yisrael are blessed with this. The Gedolei Yisrael have people coming to them all the time. So another man came to Reb Chaim Kanievsky. He said to Reb Chaim Kanievsky, he gave a sidelong glance. This way, that way. He said, I'm the Mashiach, and I'd like you, nobody's going to listen to me. I want you to be Mefarsim it. Chaim Kanievsky. I mean, what would your reaction? Now, I want you to think for a second what your own reaction would be. What would your reaction? Just think for a second. What does a Gedolei Yisrael do? And how it goes in the sensitivity. Rav Shteiman didn't criticize him. He just asked him a question. Let him think, he never said he's not Eliyahu Hanovi. He just said, I got a kasha for you. He built the man up. Comes to Reb Chaim, I'm the Mashiach. Reb Chaim Shem said, really? Do you know that the Yerushalmi says Mashiach has a donkey that has 100 colors? Do you have a donkey with 100 colors? And I said, no. Panic stricken, no. He said, get a donkey with 100 colors, then come back and we'll talk. We'll see what to do from there. The Gedolei Yisrael have these sorts of people. So they said to the Stipler, B'Sof Yomov, they said to the Stipler, you're old, you're frail, you haven't got these koiches anymore. Why do you let the nudniks come in and take up your time? The Stipler said, the Stipler who wrote the Kilas Yaakov, the Stipler who was Rabban Shel Yisrael. Stipler said, who knows if that isn't why I'm alive today is because I helped these people. Don't you have nudniks in your life? Maybe you're the nudniks. Maybe the guy next to you, the people are looking at each other. Don't you have your nudniks in your life? Maybe that's the biggest chutz that you have. The person has to know, where am I holding? Where am I holding really? Sigh in the good things, sigh in my flaws, what needs to be fixed up. Finally, just end story. I think I told this on Shivos or B'Tammuz, but I was so moved by this story. This is the period we focus on Bein Adam L'Chavero. Yes, everybody likes their Chanukah menorah with all the Hidurim and Mahadrin, Mina Mahadrin and a Lulav and a Pesach Matzahs and Bein Adam L'Makom, that's where our frumkeit is written on our forehead. Yiddishkeit is Bein Adam L'Chavero. The Torah Jews, Bein Adam L'Chavero. There's no limit in Bein Adam L'Chavero, how much we could improve. If we're good, we should get better. If we're better, we should get even better than that. Two brothers went to court. They went to Arkos. Arkos means secular court. When you do has some sort of litigation, it's usher to go to court. The secular court is a Chilul Hashem. We go to Din Torah. Two Jews had a Yerusha. Brothers had a Yerusha. They were fighting over the Yerusha. Could you believe such a thing? They were fighting over the inheritance. They went to secular court. They got to secular court. The judge, the Shomer Shabbos Jew with the yarmulke. They came in. The judge sees they're from Jews as well. Said to them, fellas, I want to tell you something. Before I became a judge in the secular legal system, I knew that I would have halachic issues. I went to speak to a Rav to ask him to give me guidelines, certain issues that will come up. And one of the things he told me is that if frum Jews ever come to you for litigation, you have to send them to Din Torah. So fellas, you're going to have to go to Din Torah. And I want to tell you something. Let me give you a piece of musar. Your father who left you that Yerusha will have a lot more nachas ruach if you divide things up in din Torah than if you divide it up in arkos. And I know that for a fact because the Rav that I asked my shilas to was your father. First, what are you doing in arkos? There's another Jew. What are you doing in arkos? What are you doing in Beis Din? What are you anywhere near arkos for? Go to din Torah if you have to. You don't have to go to din Torah either. You're also allowed to give in a little bit. Finally, man who was given a brand new car by his brother for his birthday. Man was given a brand new Lexus. Birthday present. The brother was very wealthy. Given a Lexus by his brother for his birthday. A new car, what could be better? He gets in the car, he gets in his Lexus, he's driving around, sees one of the little kids, one of the neighborhood kids, 11-year-old kid who he happens to know. He says, hey Jeff, you want to ride my new car? Yeah, what kid doesn't want to ride in a new car? He gets in the car, starts driving around. He says, you know where I got this car from? No. He says, my brother gave me this car as a birthday present. The little kid is looking at him. He goes, wow, I wish I could be a brother like that. I wish I could be a brother like that. He says to him, Mr. Murphy, you know, I think my brother would like a ride in the car too, and I'd like to be a brother like that right now. Think we could give my brother a ride? He says, sure. This guy's happy to drive his Lexus around. Where do you live? Drives him over to the house. He says, I'm going to get my brother. He also wants a ride. He goes into the house. 5 minutes later, he comes bouncing down the stairs with his brother in a wheelchair, is totally handicapped. Says, come on, Mike, this nice man's going to give me a ride in the car. That's what we want to do in this period of the year. I wish I could be a brother like that. It's not about me, it's about the brother. Talk about achdus in Klal Yisrael. Avas chinam, I don't know where that comes from. Achdus, that's one of our words. Achdus means brotherhood in Klal Yisrael. The way we fulfill our potential and make use of this day is that we take a look at ourselves, we try to encourage ourselves to continue moving forward in a positive way, and we improve in our interpersonal relationships, bein adam l'chavero, and b'schus our efforts, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees us trying, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be mekayim, the chazal, the posuk. If Klal Yisrael is worthy, hayom im b'kolo sishmo, on this day, if we obey, then the Mashiach will come. Amen.